Good day, you are welcome to Honor Roll tutorial class. Today we are going to be reviewing the jamb test, which is titled The Lekki Headmaster by Kabir Garba. We are going to be looking at chapter 1, analyzing this chapter 1, and the chapter 1 is titled Dusk. The chapter 1 started in the assembly ground that morning. In the assembly ground that morning, Mr. Beppo, the principal of the school, got to the assembly, but he was not looking happy. He was not as smart as he used to be. This was the same principal that always wears a smiling face. So after the pep talk on the assembly ground that morning, Mr. Beppo, the principal, took the microphone from Angel, the chapel prefect, and held it, saying nothing. He held the mic and said nothing. Everyone was waiting for the principal to speak, but he just stood there, staring at the tiles on the floor. He tried to speak, but he did not say any word. Now, everywhere was silent. Everywhere was silent. The principal again tried to speak. This time around, tears started coming out of his eyes. He tried to speak again. This time around, the microphone fell from his hand and fell on the ground. Tears started streaming out of his eyes again. Everyone in the assembly, including the members of staff, everyone was surprised and shocked. What could be wrong with the principal? He then hid his face and covered his face with his palm and continued to sob and cry. So the vice principal, Mrs. Grace Ape, was the first to ask him, "What is the matter, principal?" 4 other members of staff joined her. However, the principal, Mr. Beppo, said nothing. Instead, he cried the more. The school nurse, Mrs. Titi, but she's fondly called Nurse Titi by the students, she offered the principal, Mr. Beppo, a handkerchief for him to clean and wipe his tears. Then the principal immediately told the chemistry teacher, Mr. Justus Anabe, to conclude the assembly and tell the students to go to their various classes. Then the nurse Titi, the vice principal, Mrs. Grace Ape, and then Mr. Oyelana, the CRS teacher, led the principal to his office. In his office, Nurse Titi asked the principal what the matter is. Still, the principal said nothing. Rather, he continued crying. He continued to cry. And so, at about 8:05 in the morning, more teachers came into the office of the principal to console with him. But the vice principal advised them to go back to their classes and asked the school guidance counselor, Mrs. Bekegbe, to remain. For over 30 minutes, they petted Mr. Beppo. Sometimes, Mr. Beppo will look at this ceiling. He will shake his head. He will look at the faces of everyone and then continued to cry. Now, the vice principal phone had been ringing. The vice principal phone had been ringing. News has already gotten to parents at home about the situation in the school. So they were calling to know what had happened. One of the parents said she heard that the principal was crying and rolling on the floor. Of course, that is not true. Another parent called that he heard that the principal had been shouting in Yoruba, "Oluwa gba mi o, Oluwa gba mi o, Oluwa gba mi o," that is, "Save me, oh God." Well, that is not also true. So the vice principal, Mrs. Grace Appel, decided that the best thing to do was to call the school MD, who is Mrs. Ibidun Gloss, to call her and then let her know the situation of what is happening in the school. Now, remember that earlier that morning, the assembly did not begin in a tearful note. In fact, there was joy in the faces of the students. In fact, the atmosphere of the school changed, especially since the school management reduced the boarding fee from 250,000 per session to 165,000 naira. Now, what does this mean? This school has a boarding facility. So the boarding facility is the amount for those staying in the hostel is 250,000 per session. So many students who cannot afford this amount of money were coming from their homes. So as a result of this, they come late. Usually they come late to the assembly ground because of the hold up and the delays on their way before getting to school. So the school decided to reduce the amount of the boarding fee to 165,000. So this made so many parents to put their children in the school hostel, and as a result, almost all the students were available on the assembly ground at exactly 7:45 a.m. 7:45 a.m. in the morning. But the school also increased the excursion fee to 93,000 naira. Most parents did not complain when the school did this, but some teachers gossiped about this, especially Mr. Wood, the fine art teacher. In fact, in one of his usual grammar, he said, "In matters of economics, I swear the MD is a witch and wizard rolled into one." That was his statement. Now, this particular school, Stardom School, Lekki, is located in Lekki. Now, during the assembly, there is a routine they normally do. During the assembly, they say their short prayer and recite the second stanza of Nigerian anthem, "O God of creation, direct our noble course." So this was what they do every Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that is what they do every Tuesdays and Thursdays. While the Christians and the Muslims, their prayer were on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don't forget, their prayer were on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday. So this school also, they always had pep talk in the assembly ground. Pep talk means a student will be given a topic to come and speak in the assembly ground that day. So they always do this, and it was Mr. Beppo, the principal, that introduced this pep talk 7 years earlier when he got to the school. So that particular morning, it was Ikenna. It was Ikenna Egbo. It was Ikenna Egbo. This Ikenna Egbo that said the pep talk on the assembly that morning, and the topic was on his experience on an excursion to Just. So while he was speaking, he said so many nice things about Just. In fact, he eulogized the city of Just and said the city is a very beautiful place. And he also made mention of so many places he visited in Just. He talked about visiting the Lamingo Dam. He also talked about visiting the University of Just. He also visited Shere Hills, Wase Rocks, Solomon La Amusement Park. So he said all this. In fact, Ikenna spoke very well on the assembly ground that day. One of the best students that the school had. And such a wonderful performance, Mr. Bekbo rather, who is the principal, was expected to come and speak after him and then praise him for his excellent performance. So that morning, everybody was excited to hear that the principal was going to, say something regarding to Ikenna's pep talk that morning. But the principal, when he came, the case was different. Rather than expecting him to be very happy to speak, he was in a sad mood. Now, this principal was a very good man, and in fact, the students they usually call him principal because of how he is very emphatic on pronouncing the word principal correctly. You know, we pronounce it principal, but the correct pronunciation is what? Principal, principal. So whenever the students see him, they call him principal. So let us continue. So that morning, like we said, the principal was not happy in order to speak. So back at the office, the MD is now around. The MD is now around in the office. So the MD got into her office, removed her glasses, and then dropped them by the side stool in the office there. Now, she was just wondering what could happen, what could make Mr. Beppo to be in this kind of situation. Why is he causing so much confusion in the school? Just previous day, just a day before this day, the school has celebrated its over 70% success in WAEC examination. That is, the school celebrated what? The excellent performances by their students who sat for the WAEC exam. And in the celebration, prizes were given to class teachers, SS3 class teachers. They were given 20,000 naira. They were given snacks and were also given wine. Now, those who handle subjects where candidates score distinction, they took home 30,000. Those teachers whose students wrote the WAEC and then got distinction, that is excellent, they were given 30,000 naira to encourage these teachers. Now, the only teacher who had a problem with their subject, that is, student did not get up to got to distinction. They got D's. Of course, D is not a good performance. So these teachers were Mr. Obong Okaku, the chemistry teacher, and Miss Taye Karim, geography teacher. So these two teachers were the only teachers that their students score D7 in the WAEC examination. In fact, in this particular school, if your student score F9 in this WAEC exam, consider yourself to be sacked. In fact, it happened to one of the teachers, one of their previous teacher, Mr. Funshaw Daniels. He was not even spared, even though he was a cousin of the MD. He was not spared, but he was sacked because why? His student failed the subject. He failed it. So, following the MD's arrival in school, arrival in school after she was called by the vice principal. So she invited the principal to her office. She invited Mr. Beppo to her office and was trying to ask him what the problem is. Mr. Beppo kept on saying that I will be all right. The MD was like, you cannot tell me you'll be all right when you are not feeling, you are not looking right. You keep saying you are all right, but you are not saying what the problem is. You are aware that given your position in this school and the excellent performance you have always put up, you are center of everything that goes on. You are supposed to be the embodiment of sanity, the balm to trouble nerves. So all these were the things that the MD, Mrs. Ibidu Gloss, was saying to Mr. Beppo. So the MD invited Mr. Okpe, the physics teacher. He is also a pastor, so they call him a teacher pastor or something like that. So they call him that, or pastor teacher. So Mr. Okpe Wade is also a pastor, but he's the physics teacher in the school. So he called Mr. Okpe to our office, and then when Mr. Okpe came in, he saw Mr. Beppo there, the principal, and he was like asking him what the matter is, what the problem is. And then the principal did not still say anything, though he told him so many words in order to lighten him up. But Mr. Beppo still remained in the state. So the MD now decided that they should do what? They should call the wife. They should call Mr. Beppo's wife. In fact, Mr. Okpe, the physics teacher, was the one that suggested that why don't have they called the wife at least to know what is happening. So they asked for his wife's number. They asked for his wife's number, and then when they saw the number was a foreign number. The principal's wife now lives in London. That was what Mr. Okpe told the MD. So the MD replied that, I know. I wonder if he's not missing her badly. So the MD just said that jokingly, if it will make them to laugh a little. But nobody laughed. So the MD decided that Mr. Okpe should take the principal home. He should take him home. So the pastor, which is Mr. Okpe, was like, it was like it is not the best thing to do, considering his circumstances right now. So he now said to him, I don't understand, Pastor Wade, but I think there is a little problem with that. It might not be a very good idea if he is left to go alone in these circumstances. So that was what Mr. Okpe was telling the MD. But the MD understood the sentiment there. He understood the sentiment there. And the best was for him to go home, because, like he said, what would the parents think if they learned the principal was crying like a child? Do you understand? So the school, an impatient spirit told her. An impatient spirit told her, just like he said, the school was not a rehabilitation center, but a place for learning and earning money. Please guide him to his office, arrange to take him home, she said emphatically. She also told Mr. Okpe, I learned that the guidance counselor was with him earlier. Perhaps he can go with him. He might also visit the clinic as soon as possible. So this was what the MD told Mr. Okpe to do, to take Mr. Beppo, the principal, to take him home. And that was the end of the chapter 1, which is dogs. So in the next video, we are going to be looking at chapter 2, which is titled the enticement. We are going to look at when Mr. Beppo finally said what was wrong with him. Thank you for listening. Please, if you have not subscribed to our channel, make sure that you subscribe to our channel, like, and also comment. I love you. Thank you very much.